Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday before the long weekend. It is noon Eastern time here on the East Coast as many people get ready to go down the shore for the long weekend. But before we do that, here on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and every other place that you can get your podcast, it is time for Talent Experience Live, the show that covers everything that you need to know in talent acquisition, recruiting, talent management, and HR as a whole. I am your host, Devin Foster, and this program is proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion people find the right work. That is why we put on this wonderful program. It's why we have fantastic webinars. I know this morning we had a press release going out about a live event happening on June 6th regarding generative AI, so you won't want to miss that. But all of this leads into our purpose. And the way that we truly achieve our purpose is through our intelligent talent experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond, recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers get data and insights that they need through automation and analytics. So if any of that interests you at all, and I'm sure some of it does, run. Don't walk to phenom.com. You can register for the live event. You can check out some of the past webinars that we've done. We're going to cover one of them today and everything in between. That pays the bills. We are off and rolling, and we have a great episode for you here today. I'm joined by John Deal, and we are talking about the skills of tomorrow. I know that I mentioned that we recently had a webinar on Tuesday. It was with the Skills Collective, and John Deal was kind enough to host that and also join us here today because skills are all the rage. Everyone's talking about it. I hop on LinkedIn. Every company has a skills approach. Everyone is moving towards a skills future. But all of that is good and well to speak about. However, there's a lot of questions that individuals have, right? It's like getting a gym membership and you've never worked out before. You go in there, all of the equipment, all of the terminology and everything can be very overwhelming. So John's going to answer your questions. If you have any more, feel free to hop into the comments section. But we took a few from the webinar itself, and today we're going to talk about that. So without any further hesitation, let's bring John onto the program.
Hello, sir.
Hey, how are you?
I am wonderful.
I love that. That's fantastic. Any fun plans for the long weekend?
I will be accompanying my child to a soccer tournament. That's pretty much par for the course on most of these holiday weekends at this point. So
at least the weather should be nice, though.
I think it will be. Yeah.
No rain.
It should be a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Which shout out to the graphic that our creative team did. Was that a pullover?
No. Cardigan, but thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Killer boots, man. But no, I John, thank you. I'm excited for your weekend. I'm excited for the soccer that lies ahead. Soccer, obviously, skillful game, right? Takes a lot of dribbling and passing, shooting and scoring. And I've talked about this previously. I love that you mentioned soccer there because organizations seem to be moving towards this job description less institution, right? I mentioned a Ted Lasso episode where they talk about total football, where they focus on what individuals are good at what and focus less on where they are positioned. And I think a lot of that has to do with skill. Tell us a little bit about the webinar that you hosted. Was it Tuesday?
It was on Tuesday. I did have some folks from the Skill Collective, one of our partners here at Phenom, and joined me from the UK remotely. So we talked a little bit about skills, a lot of bit about skills, and not only what we're excited about, but also like what are some of the things that make it difficult for organizations to move forward. You know, we're realistic that it can be a complex topic for people to broach, and that people might be tired of hearing about it, but that's not going to stop us from talking about it. So, like you said, shouted us with questions. Yeah. We got a lot of questions during the webinar. So wanted to kind of sit down and give some answers to people.
Yeah. And one of the resources that kind of prompted the webinar was the State of Skills that we released recently. I know that we had some data that we pulled individually as Phenom, but there were also quite a few articles that were mentioned in the State of Skills. If you could give us kind of a 30,000 foot view of what the state of skills is, why someone should go download it, and then what were the resources that you were pulling so it didn't come off as biased, right? There's a lot of organizations that will release reports and it's like, wait, there's something funny going on here. I imagine that you had some empirical evidence to back up this thought process.
We did. So yeah, we did pull a lot of data from our skills ontology that we have here, and we have a couple of different ontologies at work here to tie skills to roles, and really focus on not just what's popular today, but what's coming down the pike for a couple different industries like financial services, like healthcare. Who is the report good for? The report is good for folks that want to see what's emerging, what's declining, and use that for planning purposes in their organization, right? If they see that certain skills are declining and they have a glut of those in the organization, then they need to start thinking about what they're going to do with those employees and where they could potentially move them to satisfy the needs that are emerging. Also, what are the roles that you can take and evolve very easily to meet those emerging needs so that you can get there faster? Yeah. So also, you should download it if you're looking for the types of applications that people are using skills for, because it's not really just about learning and development. People are using it for hiring. People are using it for performance management. People are using it for a whole lot of applications in the talent lifecycle. So we try to outline all of that, and we try to frame it against the labor reports that are out there, the way that the Department of Labor defines different industries, different roles, different skills, so that it's, as you said, it's not just a one-sided view from Phenom. It's pulling information from those other sources, which they're talking about skills, they're talking about emerging and declining roles as well. So grounding everything with our data set to give people the visibility that they need to make the right plans.
Absolutely. And super important to do that, because if you were to poll iPhone users on who uses Apple AirPods, it would probably be 100%, right? So getting that grand perspective of this is the way that the Department of Labor views skills. These are the skills that they mention, and these are the ones that we see declining and potentially increasing over the next couple of years. You mentioned performance, right? And I know when talking about skills, one of the questions that came up during the webinar was organizations are often performance led when it comes to promotions, who's doing well, who's not doing well. Shifting to skills is a big mindset shift. Is there a kind of a healthy balance of the two that organizations are going to use in the future? Or how does that conversation begin where it's, John, you hit X amount of deals this year, right? John deal. I didn't even do that on purpose. That happens a lot. Versus John, you are bringing this skill set to the table, right? How does that kind of work when speaking very abstractly about skills in organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it is, one is feeding the other. We still want to promote a robust performance management process and something that's really fluid. I think you guys did a TXL, you and the other JD, about the annual performance review or disappointment, right? The annual disappointment review.
Yes.
So we are still advocating for a fluid process, but by using skills data, you can have more meaningful conversations with members of your team, right? And so you're not just necessarily looking at number of deals closed or number of deals fostered, but you can get a view of what at a granular level they're able to bring to the table, not only in their current position, but if you have other needs in the organization or in your team, what could they potentially bring to bear? Yeah. So it's, we said on the webinar, skills is just the starting point. It's not the end point, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're not talking about, the overhauling your entire practice of performance management. Yeah. We're saying use this to have better conversations about performance.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned, skills that can be leveraged in the future, because when we talk about this, I know there were a couple questions on the webinar that was, this is fantastic for new hires, right? We have this up-to-date resume as best it can be for a, candidate who's coming into our pipeline. From that, we can gather some insights and kind of attach them to skills, right? when you have somebody who's already ingrained in your organization, let's take, for instance, someone who's in business development, right? And they've been on a number of calls, they're starting to add skills. How does that, when we talk about the overall goal, which is keeping folks there for the long haul, growing a career, being a company man or company woman, right? For the tenure of their organization, how do you begin to assess what skills are added as someone grows their career within an organization? Is it a time period, right? Well, if Sally Mae is in a BDR role for 6 months, we can assume that they have some negotiating skills or something along those lines. What are some of the processes there?
Yeah, I think a lot of the tools that have come out from an AI perspective help to associate skills with people in the organization, right? So you don't have to necessarily go out and poll everybody. You can use things like Gong, for instance, for a business development person. You can use that to analyze the calls that they're doing to see, okay, yeah, they really do have a strong negotiation skill. Let's make sure that gets added to the profile. So you can make assumptions based off of time period as well, but you can combine those assumptions with these tools to really beef up those profiles for employees. So it's all about taking those tools, getting within the flow of work, and pulling that information into a system that can analyze it and say, okay, this person did this project, then they have demonstrated these skills effectively.
Yeah. Also, there was questions on a webinar aren't always positive, John. So I want to ask you one that jumped out at me. It was one of the ones I wanted to ask you first. But it mentioned a Forbes article that called "Skills-Based Hiring a Dud." Right? You went on later in the episode to refer to skills as the new Infinity Stones. Right? Quite a contrast there. So do you want to maybe unpack why Forbes would say that there have been struggles with skills-based hiring and how you feel, completely different on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a question of instant gratification. I think that the way that society is these days, there's a need for more immediate feedback across the board, right? So hopefully people are liking this episode of TXL right now.
Yeah.
Or else it's going to be a really long weekend at the Foster household. But I certainly think that it's not moving as fast as everybody was hoping that it would. But if you were at I Am Phenom, or if you had seen some of the sessions that we did a skills session with a few of our customers, and they came up on stage and they talked about that it had been a long journey, but that they are starting to see very positive results from that journey. So when you look at a standard adoption curve, I think we're still in that early adopter phase. I certainly think it's not proliferating as much as, Forbes, whoever wrote that article, probably was hoping that it would, which is why they kind of framed it that way. But I think that we're starting to see people move from theory to practice. And I think that as more people move into that practical stage, then the dominoes will start to fall more.
Yeah. So. I liken it to, to use a sports terminology. I love sports, John. I don't know if you know this about me. But it's drafting your first round quarterback. Pick one, round one overall. They are the savior of your organization, right? And I think everyone talked about skills that way. But when you really have to shift the culture, another good little tie in there to football, it's going to take time, right? You have to, number one, find the individuals on board with it in your organization, right? Who are going to be those champions that say, we are going to continue to use performance basing, but now we have to do skills evaluation, right? Now we have to dive into what skills we're going to need. You mentioned the report talks about skills that are on the decline. Who are those individuals that you can reach out to before their current roles are obsolete and say, let's upskill you here, right? I think that is maybe where Forbes was it's a Zach Wilson situation, right? Where he comes in, he has a terrible offensive line. Nobody buys in. They bring in somebody to teach him like Aaron Rodgers, and the whole thing fails, and then he's shipped off. We're going to get to a place where skills are in the future because we're still talking about them, right? And I think the conversation continues to get louder, but we're still figuring out how to best use them, which segues me to my next question. When it comes to evaluating skills, you mentioned some of the customer stories at I Am Phenom. What are some of the best practices that you're hearing organizations do for evaluating them? I know Phenom has more than a handful of skills in our system. I add another zero every single time. So now it's 400,000, I believe. But when it comes to evaluating them, obviously there's a feedback loop there, right? You can't simply flip the light switches on and say, all right, this position has this set of skills. You're in product marketing, you can do public speaking, you can build decks, whatever the case may be. What are the best practices for skills-based evaluation?
Yeah, I think, it's taking multiple data points. There's no one thing that I think you should do in order to say, yes, this person has these skills. So you can do assessments. We believe in self-rating. People know themselves. And we get a lot of feedback that, maybe they'll game the system. They'll say skills that they don't have just to get a job. And so that's why we say to use multiple data points. Yeah. People know themselves. They can add skills. People's peers know them. Their managers know them. So skill endorsement is another good way to evaluate skills. And then also, like I said, the flow of work, pulling in data from those systems to try and identify skills on a profile. So using multiple data points is where we've seen success with our customers who are using kind of skills-based hiring or skills-based evaluation of employees.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, to anyone who says they're going to try and game the system has never met anyone with imposter syndrome. I can tell you that much, where it's like, I don't know if I have this skill, right? And to your point, I think as we build out this evaluation, it may turn into more of these personality-like assessments, not where it's meant to trick you, but to get folks genuine answers, right? When it comes to problem solving and things like that. And that's going to take time. It took years for personality assessments to come into place. And I've taken quite a few, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's who I am, right? No matter what the system may be. You mentioned the multiple data points and the self-assessments there. I know at I Am Phenom, Ilya got up on stage, Ilya Golden, and he talked about the challenge of getting buy-in from employees, right? I think the direct quote was, individuals are more likely to go on LinkedIn and update their profile than they are on an internal system. When it comes to getting that buy-in, are there any tips, tricks, or things that you've seen work well in the past with organizations that are beginning to adopt the skills?
Yeah, you have to make it very outcome driven, right? People need to understand why they're giving information, right? So on LinkedIn, it's, I think, basically so they can impress their friends and find their next job, probably. But
yeah,
but it really needs to be driven to, this is going to help me get my next position, or this is going to help me be considered for promotion, or whatever it is. Start with the outcome, and then the data will follow, right? So blindly sending somebody a bunch of courses and saying, take these courses because we think it would be good for you, without I'd love to be a data scientist. Yeah. It sounds easy if Ilya is listening. I think he's on vacation, so we can get away with it. But just not having that outcome driven framework in place is a sure way for things to kind of fail. If you tie things to outcome, if people clearly understand the reasons why they're participating in things, why they're adding stuff to a profile, then it makes them much more ready to add those things to that profile, much more willing to find a mentor or take an online course or whatever, because they see the end goal and it's very clear to them that the organization is setting them up for success.
Yeah, and I think you can make it a part of the calendar year, right? You talked about the annual disappointment review on that episode with JD and I. We talked about how you have to build relationships, have regular meetings, but having that kind of hard line in the sand that says, all right, let's take a look back and reflect, right? At that point, you can start to institute some of these assessments and things like that, where a manager's assessing skills of an employee and employees doing the same thing for them. And the good thing about that is it's setting up that goal, right, in the future. Where do you want to be in your career, right? Where do you want to be compensation wise, things like that. All of those fun conversations that people love to have and aren't uncomfortable at all, but it can kind of, give you your results and give you your feedback, and it brings a conversation starter to the stage, right? Like where as an employee, you can say, hey, I noticed that this skill wasn't here for me. I do think that that's something that I want to improve upon, or whatever it may be. But all of that comes down to data, right? And getting that buy-in from employees as a whole.
Yeah, I think like you said earlier in the episode that it's a shift in mindset, right? But it's not just a shift in mindset for HR or for managers, but for employees that, hey, I'm going to think about skills, and I'm going to think about it in a way that's ongoing. That's going to become a little bit more second nature to, what I'm doing in my daily work, right? And so, and really, it helps out anyway, because a lot of people, when they go for their annual disappointment review, then they're like scouring their calendars and looking in their Google Docs to figure out what they did in January. Right.
Absolutely.
So, but if you can get them thinking about it all along the way, then I think it, and skills are so granular that it gives you more building blocks to think about, right? As opposed to these large umbrella things like, oh, have I achieved director level of this, right? Or whatever, right? So social media emperor, right? But maybe you did achieve like engagements, right? Like social engagements, or media content, or whatever those smaller things are that are easier for your brain to digest as well, and keep track of.
And 100, it's tough to look back and say a year's a long period of time, right? It doesn't feel like it. Feels like yesterday. Another question that came up during the webinar, and I kind of want to tie this into best practices a little bit, but it was focusing on external candidates versus internal candidates. I think we both agree that rolling this out to your employee base is a challenge. Forbes says it's not going to happen overnight. You agree with that, right? You're going to have to truly formulate a plan for what works for your business. Have you seen organizations start with a skills-based approach for external candidates and then take their lessons learned and try and apply those internally, or vice versa? What is it kind of looking at from a skills rollout perspective?
Yeah, I think we've seen both sides. It is a little bit easier to roll out to talent acquisition because it's a smaller group of people, right? And so you have the ability to have more one-on-one conversations with the practitioners. It is, it's a little bit of a shift in mindset for sure, because they're used to looking at job titles, they're used to looking at which university people went to, right? And so you gotta change the mindset a little bit. But yeah, we've certainly seen folks roll it out for skills-based hiring of candidates externally, and then moving it internal as well, because that's where the big change management piece comes in, because now you're talking about your entire organization, right?
Yeah.
So, but some folks do start internally. They just do it with small pockets of folks, right? So they'll pick a team or a department. Like you said, you got to find a champion within the organization. And once you have that champion, then you can start to experiment with that person and that person's team and that person's department.
Absolutely. I got so excited when you said, moving away from looking at what university people went to. No one cares, right? I know you went to Michigan, Penn State, whatever Big Ten school it was, but as small schools, we get good educations as well, right? I frustrates me beyond belief where there's so much onus put on that, right? And I think that is really an accolade towards this skills conversation, is people have real world experiences. They have internships. They have previous jobs, if they're a tenured employee, that may not show up on that job title or that job description. This gets to the heart of it, right? Yes, you had a bachelor's degree in business. Doesn't mean that you can't work in marketing. It doesn't mean that you can't become a data scientist if you so want to, John, right? All of these things that we're talking about, which is what I think the goal for organizations is to get people. It's certainly for our organization. We want everyone to find the right role, right? Get help people get the right work. So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about it. I want to ask you. Obviously, we pulled some of our favorite questions from the webinar. Was there anything that we may have missed? I know you talked a bit about the state of skills report. Anything that you wanted to share from that before we sign off for a long weekend?
There was one comment that was brought up during the webinar that one of the complexities that organizations are seeing is just that they don't have employees staying for long. So how do they have this skills journey conversation if the average tenure is not that long? And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that you're not developing your employees because they're leaving because they're not developing, right? And so what we've seen, and some of what you see in the state of skills report, is that the more comprehensive of a development program you have, the more conversations you have about careers, the more likely people are to stay longer, for sure. But just because you might have be in an industry where, like a retail industry, where you do have a high amount of turnover, that doesn't necessarily mean that should preclude you from having conversations about skills. It just means that you're going to frame them in a different way, right? It could be that you're going to push out learning that's going to help people more in their day-to-day jobs while they're with the organization, right?
Yeah.
Help, maybe they're on the floor and you want to push them some learning or some sales skills, right? To help them have conversations with customers about and try to upsell them, right? It's very simple thing that could be done. That's still skills oriented, and that person is going to leave in 3 months after they go back to college, right?
That's true.
But that's fine. You could still have the conversations.
Yeah, and then you can build out your alumni network. You can do all of these things, and I think having this kind of school of thought in your organization is going to leave a better taste in individuals' mouths, right? Like when they are looking for that next role, right? I've seen all of the stuff on social where it's you have to job hop every 2 years in order to change job titles to get that next experience. But what happens when somebody leaves a company where they're treated and really looked out for when it comes to their career, and then they go to one where they're not using a skills-based approach, right? They don't feel that culture, that sense of community. They're going to come back, right? Ideally, right? I don't know anything about that, but just school for thought. Anywho, where can people get the state of skills report, John?
The state of skills report is available for download at phenom.com. I recommend that you pull it down. There is some very interesting data in there for sure. We talked about the Sweet 16 of skills. There's a lot of proliferation in, for instance, the healthcare industry for like teledoc stuff, and now teletherapy and tele everything. We're also seeing in the life sciences industry a lot more market research and competitive intelligence skills coming out because of the addition of new companies, smaller companies using technology to get into that industry and lowering the barrier of entry. So pretty cool data points in there. Not just because I helped write it, but yeah, phenom.com, state of skills.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy a lovely weekend out on the soccer pitch. And I'm sure we'll have you on soon enough, right?
I look forward to episode number 15. Getting close.
We just make it up as you go along. But that was it. It was a great conversation on the skills of tomorrow. As tradition around these parts, I know we skipped a few episodes, but it is once again time for song lyrics that are both inspirational and you should memorize and use every day for the rest of your life. This one is a favorite in my household. It goes, "Isn't it amazing? It's my favorite part because you'll see. Here's where she meets Prince Charming, but she won't know till chapter 3. And the reason why I say that, how that segues to skills, is it takes some time to see where this is going, to roll it out into your organization. Skills can be your Prince Charming. Don't give up on it just yet. Download the State of Skills report. Find out there. Shout out to Emma Watson and Belle from Beauty and the Beast. That's where that song is from. We can't wait to see you next week as we dive into another report. That's all I can say. I'm contractually obligated to say no more. But we hope everyone has a safe, happy, and healthy Memorial Day weekend. And we will see you next week, same place, same time. Thanks so much.